Hi guys, this is Beersborn. Welcome back. In today's video, we're going to start building our third enemy concept. And the idea for this enemy is that it's going to move randomly, at random intervals of time and in random directions. Now, we're going to start in our layout, and what I'd recommend doing is if you have any of the other enemies in your layout, let's just drag them outside the layout. Put them in the gray space outside, just so they don't get in the way. And now what we're going to do is we're going to insert a new object. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to hit insert new object, and I'm going to click one time on sprite. I'm going to name this enemy 3. You can name it whatever you want. The name doesn't matter as long as you know what the name is. Just click insert, click anywhere, and we're going to load the sprite that we've created for our third enemy type. I'm going to use this fly. It's just the idle animation, so it's probably just going to be a still image of your enemy. And there it is. Now, if you want to, you can name this animation. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to name it idle, just so I know which one it is. And since it's not animated, I don't have to worry about the speed or anything. All right, looks good. Now we want this enemy to move randomly, and the way that we're going to do that is by using an instance variable and a couple different behaviors. It's actually kind of similar to what we did with enemy 2. We're going to start with our instance variable. Let's add a new one, and we're going to call this direction. This is going to be a variable that controls which direction our enemy is moving. Now the type here is going to be a number. We're going to keep it as a number. The way that this is going to work is I'm going to have a random number generator that generates any number between, let's say, 1 and 4. And if a 1 comes up, we'll move our enemy to the left. If a 2 comes up, we'll move our enemy to the right. If a 3, maybe it'll move up. If it's a 4, it'll move down. And that way we can just keep randomly picking numbers and moving our enemy randomly based on whatever number comes up. So we're going to have a direction, it's a type number, and the initial value can just be 0. Let's click OK. Let's close that instance variable. Now let's go down to the behaviors. We're going to add 2 new behaviors for this. I'm going to add 8 direction movement, because I think 8 direction movement is a pretty easy way to move our enemy. We've used it before with the previous enemy, right? I'm also going to add a timer, just like with enemy 2. Now, I would recommend going into your 8 direction settings right here and just fixing a couple things right off the start. It's set to angle smooth by default, and what that'll do is it'll rotate your whole sprite. So my fly, for example, might rotate upside down or on its side based on whatever direction it's moving. And that doesn't really work with what we're trying to do. So I'm going to set the angle from smooth to no. I'm also going to recommend that you turn off the default controls. Default controls, if that box is checked, our player will be able to control the movement of the enemy with the arrow keys on your keyboard. And we don't want that, so we're going to uncheck that box. So set angle, no, default controls, off. Good, that should do it. Now let's go over to the event sheet and let's start adding some events for this. I'm going to start by adding an event for enemy 3, and I'm going to go down to compare instance variable. Under compare instance variable, the only variable we have is direction, right? I'm going to say when it's equal to 1. I'm going to add an action. I'm going to say when the variable is 1, let's go to enemy 3, and let's simulate the control for the 8 direction movement to move our character, or I'm sorry, our enemy to the left. So if it comes up 1, our enemy moves left. Let's add another event for enemy 3. I'm going to go down again to compare instance variable, but this time I'm going to do when it's equal to 2. Then let's go to enemy 3, and we're going to simulate the control to move it right. I'm going to do this for all 4 directions. Enemy 3, compare instance variable, 3, add the action, enemy 3, simulate control, up. Enemy 3, compare instance variable, equal to 4, add action, simulate control, down. So I have 4 events here, and each one is a random, or not a random number yet, but each one is a number that's assigned to a specific direction of movement. Now, if you wanted to, you could get more technical with this. You could get more detailed and have maybe direction 5 is simulate control down and right at the same time. And then your enemy would move down and to the right at a diagonal. So you could add different variations of movement in here. We're just going to keep it pretty standard for now and just have 4 directions, up, down, left, and right. Now, the next thing we have to do is we have to create an event that starts this random number generator going. So I'm going to click on Add Event. I'm going to go to Enemy 3, and I'm going to go down to On Created. Now, what that means is the minute that this enemy is created, at the start of the game in our case, then we're going to start a timer. Add Action, Enemy 3. The timers are all the way at the bottom almost. You'll find Start Timer. And what we're going to do is we're going to make this timer a random amount of time. So the way that we use random numbers in Construct is pretty easy. You start by just typing in the word random. So for the duration, it's going to be a random amount of time. So I just type in random. Now, in addition to just the word random, you have to put in parentheses the minimum random number that it could pick and the maximum random number it could pick. So for example, say I want to make this a random number between 1 and 10. I would do parentheses 1 and then a comma 10. 1 would be the minimum number, and then it would pick any random number up until 10, and then close parentheses. Now, what we're going to use this random timer for, it's going to be how much time it takes for your enemy to change its direction of movement. Now, that 1 and 10 example is not a good pair of numbers, because if your enemy moves in the same direction for 10 seconds, that's actually a pretty long amount of time. That'll just kind of move it straight off the screen. So I'd recommend starting with smaller numbers here. I'm going to start with half a second, 0.5. And then comma, and then maybe go up to a whole second, 1 second. And I'm just kind of making up these numbers right now. We can always change them later. But this timer is going to run for a random amount of time between half a second to a full second. Now the second thing here says type. For this timer, we have 2 options. We can set it to once. What once means is when the timer is up, it'll just be done. It'll never happen again. Or regular. And what regular does is it means that as soon as the timer's done, it starts the timer over again, like a cycle. So we want to do regular because we're going to have this random timer keep happening over and over and over again. The third thing where it says tag, that's what we're going to name this timer. You have to put it in quotation marks, and let's name this one move. It doesn't have to be move, but I think that's a good name. It makes sense because this is the timer that's going to tell when our enemy to move in a new direction. So random number between 0.5 and 1, regular type, the tag or the name is move. Let's click done. Now next, we have to make an event that says what happens when the move timer is up. So I'm going to add an event for enemy 3. I'm going to go down to on timer. It's going to ask you which timer are we talking about right now. We only have one timer and we named it move, right? So I'm going to type in quotation marks, move. Let's click done. Now what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to add an action for enemy 3, where I'm going to go down to set value under the instance variables section. And we're going to set the value for direction to a random number between 1 and 4. So if 1 comes up, it'll move left. If 3 comes up, it'll move up, right? Now the way that we have to do that actually gets a little technical, so follow along with me. We're going to start by typing in random. And again, this just means it's going to pick a random number. And we're going to give it parentheses, the value from the minimum to the maximum that random number can be. And you might think, okay, that'll be 1, 4, right? Because at a minimum, it'll be 1. At a maximum, we want it to be 4. Now, the first thing that's kind of confusing about that is the way the construct picks that random number, it's up until 4, but not actually including 4. So this will pick a random number between 1 to 3.99999. It'll never actually go to the full 4. So what we have to do is we have to make this number actually 1 bigger than what we need. So if we're trying to do a random number between 1 and 4, we would do 1, 5. And that'll include 1, 2, 3, and 4, but not 5. So that's the first thing that's a little confusing. The second thing that's confusing is that construct does not only use whole numbers, meaning that it won't just pick 1, 2, 3, or 4. It might pick 1.678. It might pick 2.5. It'll pick decimal places, which won't work for us because our check is only to see if it's just equal to 1. If it comes out 1.2, it's not going to work. If it comes out 3.8, it's not going to work. It has to be the whole number. So the way that we make the random numbers only come up whole is by typing in the word floor at the beginning. F-L-O-R-R. F-L-O-O-R. And then after the word floor, you have to do an open parentheses. We have our random, parentheses 1, 5, parentheses, and then a closing parentheses at the end. That's a little technical. I'll give you a minute to take a look at that. Floor just means whole number, open parentheses, random 1 to 5, closed parentheses. That'll give us a whole number between 1 and 4. Let's click done. Now that should work. Let's try it out. Here's my enemy. He starts moving up, goes to the right, goes back up, goes to the left. He's moving around in random directions at random intervals of time. Now your enemy might just go straight off the side of the screen. Like my guys is just going to disappear up above the layout. Later we'll set boundaries so the enemies can't just wander outside of the game. But for now, they might just disappear. Let me try that again. Good, random movement. Now there's a couple things that are making this look a little weird. For one, it's not animated, so it looks like it's just kind of sliding around, right? We'll fix that. But the other thing is that when it moves to the right, it's still facing to the left, right? We want it to mirror, to face whatever direction it's moving. And that's a pretty easy fix. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go back into our event sheet, and I wanna find the direction equals 1, and then simulate direction pressing left. What we're going to do is we're going to add an action for this. We're going to go to our enemy 3, and we're going to say set mirrored. And then let's hit done for now. What we're going to say is that, well, let's look at mine as an example. My enemy is facing to the left by default, right? That's just how I drew it. I drew my enemy facing to the left. So when the enemy is moving to the left, do we want to mirror it or not mirror it? And I would say not mirror. He's already facing to the left. We're going to do the same thing for right. When direction is equal to 2, I'm going to add an action for enemy 3. I'm going to set mirrored. In this case, I'll keep it mirrored. Now yours might be the opposite of that. It just depends on which direction you drew your enemy facing. If yours is already facing to the right, then I would recommend reversing these two. Let's try it. Oh, see you later. Facing to the left when it moves to the left. Hopefully it goes to the right. Come back. Doesn't want to move to the right. There it goes. It works. Excellent. Now we can make some adjustments to this. If you want the movement to happen more quickly, like if you want it to really change directions very frequently, change these numbers. You can make this really low. Like it can be any random number between 0.1 to 0.5, just fractions of a second, and then it'll change its direction a lot. You can see that's a lot more kind of a frantic movement, which actually works kind of better for this fly, I think. So you can kind of control how often it changes directions by changing the random numbers in your timer. Excellent. Now the last thing that I want to add here is the animation. If you've already created a movement animation for this enemy, like for example, I have this flying animation, we want to export that animation from Piskel, and we're going to bring it into Construct, and we're going to put it into our enemy sprite. So let's double click on our enemy to open up the animation editor, and let's go ahead and put in our new animation here. I'm going to right click up in the top right. I'm going to hit add animation, and I'm going to name this one, I'll name it fly. I'm going to go to the folder up in the top left. I'm going to find my animation, my GIF that I've exported from Piskel. Now, because this one's animated, I would recommend changing the speed of it. You can always preview it to see how fast it's playing. It just depends on how many frames you have. You also want it to loop right? Because this is a movement, it's like a walk cycle or something, you want it to keep looping. So I'd recommend checking the loop box there. Good. So we have our new animation with our movement. Let's close our animation editor. What we're going to do is we're going to go to our event sheet and we're going to say every time it makes one of these directions happen, we'll set the animation to the movement animation. So let's start with direction 1. Let's go to add action. Let's go to enemy 3. I'm going to set the animation to quotation mark fly. I'm going to do the same thing for 2. Go to enemy 3, set the animation to fly. I'm doing this for all of the movements. You can also copy and paste if it saves some time if you want to right click, hit copy, and then go down to your next one, right click and hit paste. That's a quick way to duplicate something over and over again so you don't have to go through the same motions every time. The reason why we're adding it to all 4 of the directions is because in our next video, we're going to add an attack. And that attack is going to be if direction is equal to 5. If a 5 comes up, our enemy is going to stop and it's going to play the attack animation instead, and then go back to its movement animation when the next number comes up. So we'll get to that in the next video, but it just makes the most sense for now to set the animation to fly for each of the 4 variable numbers. Now let's try that out and see if it works. Good. It's got its movement. It faces different directions based on which way it's flying. And it's got random movement. Excellent. We'll leave it there today. In the next video, we'll add the attack. Thanks, guys. I'll see you next time.